Hi, I'm Keegan. This is GM Talks. I am joined with Cwil and Chris from our Discord server. If you ever want to try and join these conversations, we periodically ask the Discord server if they want to jump in. You'll find that information down in the description of either the podcast or the YouTube video. Today's topic is we're going to be talking about introducing new players to systems and settings. And so I just want to welcome Chris and Cwil to the show.
Glad to be
Hello.
here.
Hey there.
Quill's been on our server bringing up some interesting ideas such as evil Silverfangs, and Chris runs the Silver Page podcast. I will also link that down below. So anyway, we were having a bit of a conversation before we started, and right, and I just wanted to know. I'll get us started. Since both of you said that you have a healthy backlog of werewolf books, have either of you read the revised edition Storyteller's Handbook?
Yes.
For Apocalypse, I haven't read that particular book.
Yes, I've read the revised. I actually have a copy of it as a PDF somewhere.
Oh man, it is easily my favorite book in the whole line. Easily. And this is actually where I drew a lot of my inspiration on how to bring in new players.
I do have a similar book for Forsaken. It was a first edition, the Forsaken Chronicler's Guide, which I think by the sound of it covers a lot of the same stuff, just ways you can rework the setting to introduce new players.
Yeah, no, I remember that one too from running a Forsaken alert for 2 years. I've full disclosure, I've been a gamer. I've been a tabletop gamer since I was 6 years old. So
Sounds about right.
Yeah, and I'm 39 now.
I came to it at the ripe old age of 18 and have continued on till, oh god, I'm almost 33. I'm ancient.
The baby in the group.
I don't know. I'm actually younger than both of you. I won't say how old, but...
I feel old.
Well, then I really will refrain from giving my age, but I've been going at it since... I think I was about 9, and I distinctly remember playing a section of an old Buck Rogers RPG with my dad.
Oof. That's taking me back. I actually started on the old TSR system by the Marvel Superhero system by TSR.
Wow.
The percentile system, which, I'll be honest, I think that is probably the simplest system to teach somebody how to play a role-playing game.
Oh yeah, it's a pretty basic one, along with the storytelling dice pool.
I started on 3.5 D&D, and yeah, not bad. But so I try to not be like a mechanics junkie and probability stuff. I can because my work requires a lot of math, or at least like technical thinking. And I've I can't go into details because of NDAs, but I've done playtests for several things, and I'm like, well, if you do this, this is your percentage chance of succeeding, and if we're doing this all the time, this is really low and people are going to be frustrated. If you optimize like this, boom, this is how much damage you're doing. Woof.
Yeah.
I got into it teaching myself RPGs, and so I've gotten very good at picking up systems pretty rapidly just because of a lot of practice.
Oh, I mean... I don't think there's any wrong way to get into role-playing games because it's collective storytelling. It's about sitting down with a bunch of people and telling a really good story.
Yeah.
No, I agree with that. But back to the werewolf book real quick.
Yeah.
Right.
Back to our topic is what I do now with that book is I get my players to spend all their attributes, abilities, things like that. They pick their auspice and their breed, obviously. We run a quick prelude, and then I start them before they choose their tribe. So their tribe is empty, they have no gifts, and for certain backgrounds, they don't pick those backgrounds. If they have other backgrounds they want, I'll allow it, but they don't have to spend all their backgrounds in character creation yet either. And through play of learning the system, learning the lore, at the same rate that their characters are as they're being taught by other werewolves. They're being brought on like baby like chaperone spirit missions, being taught what it's like to be wolves and things like that if they're Hamid born, or one hilarious moment where we had a lupus trying to learn how to drive in a parking lot to spend their bonus points. Yeah, they spend their bonus points through play. Then they do their spirit quest to find their totem. And then after that, we do a slight time skip. If they have any unspent bonus points, that's when they spend them. And that can last, I think, with the current group for the podcast, which was well before we started recording, almost a year before we started recording, actually. That lasted, I think, like 3 or 4 sessions. And so they got really into their character, and they learned a lot about the lore without me taking out that tome that is the 20th anniversary book and going, who wants to borrow it this weekend?
And there's not the, does my character know this? I don't know, make me an intelligence check.
Yeah, I don't really enjoy that usually unless it's like somewhat obscure. I still do it on occasion because sometimes it's like in the air where it's a coin flip, but most of the time it's just like, yeah, you know it, yeah, you don't. But because now they've run through it and they've actually learned it in character and they took notes and they have this kind of basis of a sept that they're all involved with. They know who to go to for information, and they know who to work with.
Yeah, I've tossed around ideas on doing something similar to that with Forsaken. Just have everyone start as the equivalent as Ghost Wolves, the settings equivalent to Apocalypse's Ronin. Like, you don't know anything. You've been a werewolf for maybe 2 weeks. You know that you can shapeshift. You know that silver hurts like hell, and you know you're seeing things now. So here's what's going on in the city block you've claimed as a territory. Let's figure this out.
That's a good way to do it. One of the games I ran, I actually had them. It was hilarious because it was a couple of people I was friends with in college, but they were They were quote unquote ghost hunters, where one of them was actually just like a charlatan psychic, and they start investigating this asylum. And then real supernatural stuff starts happening. And they're learning about the world of darkness starting as mortals.
I've done that with Chronicles of Darkness before. It's great. That's one of my favorite ways of doing that for that setting. And,
that's one of those. You can do like the all guardsman party bit where they showed up expecting they were going to play a completely different game, and then halfway through the session they turn into werewolves, or they get jumped by the Sabbat and turned.
Yep. That is exactly what happened.
And then after the session, you tell them to fill in their templates.
I have done a Shovelhead game before. It was great. It was great because they were like, wait, what happened? What just happened? Why is my character being buried? What? Those are fun games.
Oh yeah, I used to do this when I was younger and had more time. Is like during holidays I'd have friends over and we'd run RPGs like as one-shots, and one actually turned into like a 2-shot. Someone on the server, I can't remember his name, he came up with a great term, a revolver game, up to 6 shots.
Yeah.
Which is a great term, but they were a bunch of like low-level gang members, and it was just a like almost Three Stooges-esque running into a popular store here in town, shooting up the place, pissing off the vampire that owned it, and him hunting them through the night as they all had like 1 dot in intelligence going, it's vampires, you idiot, vampires don't exist. And it's a Nosferatu and goes, what do you call that? A monster!
I ran a brief Shovelhead 2-shot, and one of them, who, ironically enough, I decided was a gangrel because I assigned them their clans in private, spent the entire session convinced that she was a werewolf.
Oh my god, that is just so good. That is so good. So good.
Out of character, they all knew they were playing vampire, but in character, she was utterly convinced she was a werewolf. And she hadn't even done anything werewolf-esque.
That's fantastic.
But one of the things I will have to say about introducing characters to new systems, it also really depends on the setting. Like, when you brought up the topic earlier today, I was thinking about it, and I was thinking about Pathfinder. Where that one, it's a high fantasy setting, so, standard elves and all that stuff. But one of the things that I think is important in that one is, where does the game take place on Golarion? Because if you have the Inner Sea Guide, it gives you a decent little, 1-page, 1.5-page blurb on each of the nations. So, if you're starting a game in, around Sandpoint, then you're going to want that page. If you're starting on the island nation of Absalon, you just let the players read that so they get an idea of what the culture's like and all that stuff. So it's not a really heavy info dump because you're not getting into all the deities and everything. But again, I think really how you handle the information is also setting dependent.
That's fair. If you can get it onto one page, I think that's fair. For me, though, because I homebrew a lot of my games and I get entirely too intricate with it, I focus on one area and then they explore the rest of the world and then learn it. And I try my hardest to make sure that players learn information at about the same rate as their character would. That way they retain it better, and there's a precedent for it.
Oh, agreed.
I did a Pathfinder campaign, probably one of my longest running campaigns, which is kind of depressing, that it used a homebrew setting, and I admit I was horrifically rushed on the setting, but the idea was every member of the party was a member of a mercenary company from a foreign country, and they were sent to this one city that ended up serving as their base of operations, so they had no context for the culture and for the society. So they had their backstories, but they were still by their nature outsiders when they were in the area they were arrived in.
Okay. That's a good way of doing it.
So they just kind of wandered around the city and got to know some people, which would have been nice if I was a better DM at the time and wasn't freaking out because of how little preparation I had. I think they all had fun. They became infatuated with a seedy tavern I gave them called the Smiling Unicorn. I say I gave it to them. They showed up because they wanted to go to the roughest bar in town, and that's how my brain works.
Nice.
They rented a back room to torture people.
Oh, man. But yeah, I've done that. And as we talked earlier, too, in terms of game systems, I think for me, personally, Chaosium's Call of Cthulhu is the easiest game to get people into for a couple of reasons. One, character creation, even with large groups, I don't think has ever gone past an hour. And I've run it with 4 or 5 people making characters at the same time. I don't think I've ever breached an hour in character creation for that game. And 2 is just because it's a modern setting or a 1920s setting, and we have a kind of intrinsic idea of what that setting would look like as just normal. It's very easy to create sort of a backstory without any sort of information, actually. And in fact, in terms of Call of Cthulhu, it's actually... Yeah, it's better if everyone doesn't know anything, right?
Yeah, and everyone's going in with some kind of context for what's normal.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't have to spend hours sitting down trying to figure out what constitutes a normal backstory in this world.
Yes, exactly. And then on top of that, it's just... the skill system, because everyone understands percentages. And I think the best part about 7th edition is even attribute checks now are just percentages. It's all percentage based.
Which that's nice.
Yeah, and it's just people intrinsically know what that is, right? Right.
Yeah, it's your roll, you gotta beat the number.
Yep.
And if you beat if you get below the number, you succeed. That's like the Palladium system with Rifts and Heroes Unlimited, which I can speak from experience is the hardest I've ever had to work to try and introduce people to a setting.
Yeah, Palladium games are hard, but I will say Heroes Unlimited is probably one of the funner ones once you get them past that learning curve.
Yeah, except I made the stupid mistake of setting them in Century Station.
I've been there! And leveled half the place.
I couldn't just give them a normal city. I couldn't just give them Chicago. No, I had to put them in Century Station.
Yeah. Now I leveled half the city with my character because the DM let me have a crew service weapon for my power armor as my sidearm.
They busted up a bank robbery, and they mulched all the bank robbers because they were all punching way above. These were just normal guys with alien rifles, and I think every single one of them had super strength. Had some means of enhancing their strength to the point where they were doing the entirety of a normal human's health and SDC in one punch.
Yeah, hey, Cwil, I was doing 1d6 times 10 MDC with a shot from the rifle.
Jeez.
So
yeah,
I guess
Unlimited is fine for introducing people. But Heroes Unlimited is fine for introducing people. Rifts is a nightmare.
Fun.
Oh, so, yeah.
I guess that brings a good question then for us to talk about. How do you have any special tricks for how to introduce people into really complex settings?
Honestly, for me, the trick is ultimately just taking the time to break it down for them. For example, I actually, in my online gaming group, I got like 9 people. 8 of them had never played Pathfinder before, and I was running the game. So I was running like a 9-man game with only one other experienced player at the table. And character creation took a couple of days, but...
Yeah, I bet.
But now, like, 2 of the guys who had never played before are running games, and I'm in one of them.
Okay.
So with the more complex systems, you just have to have the patience to take the time to break stuff down. And when, like, the first combat we had, it literally took probably 2 or 3 times longer than a normal combat should have in Pathfinder, because I was walking them through their sheets and what all their characters could do beyond what they had read they could do, because they were still getting used to it.
Right. Yeah, and with Heroes Unlimited, that's why I included the bank heist against perfectly normal guys with alien guns, so they could learn the action economy without having to worry about their opponents doing all this extra stuff.
Okay.
It was just guy goes pew.
I had to introduce a bunch of new people to Exalted 2nd Edition a couple years ago.
Sorry?
Exalted is one of my favorite settings, and I have a real love-hate relationship with 2nd Edition's system.
I'm sorry, because I'm right there with you.
But I started them off as mortals, just so that they could get the regular die rolling part down, how willpower worked, how virtues worked. And then they exalted part way, and they were just familiar with their village, which was homebrewed. They were taking a trading caravan to an actual established setting city so that they could learn more about the world. And they passed through a Shadowland to get there, which led to a chunk of dialogue that has been restated by myself and the players involved, and now players who were never there. Because it was so perfect. They're like, we have to get out of here by night. And one guy's like a fierce warrior type, and he's like, why? We can stand against anything. When night comes, the hungry ghosts arrive, and they will try and feed on our flesh. I fear we don't have enough in the caravan. And he just goes, well, that doesn't sound too bad. And one of the other players immediately in the background goes, oh, that sounds pretty bad. And so... a running joke with our group now for anyone who joins is if it's like, okay, that doesn't sound too bad. That sounds pretty bad. Just comes up all the time now.
Yeah, that vampire game, I was running 3 teenagers through a vampire for the first time. The only role-playing game they'd ever really played for any length of time was D&D, 5th edition specifically. So I taught them how the rules worked. I taught them how the dice rolls worked, and they were doing fine. It ended with the Nosferatu wearing a face mask made of toilet paper because they had enough sense to realize she couldn't go outside.
Oh, God.
Then they had to pull the face mask off because the gangrel accidentally sliced open a Paul Blart Mall cop, wondering why these kids are wandering around town in the middle of the night. So they used the toilet paper to try and stop him from bleeding to death.
Oh, God.
He wasn't quite a mall cop. He was just a very fat, unlucky police officer that night.
Oh, jeez.
But before he got sliced open, the gangrel jumped out of the dumpster they were trying to hide from him and yelling, and I quote, "I'm queen of the rats," and then flung a live rat she found at him to save the Nosferatu, who was currently trying to wrestle her way out of his grip, and succeeded. I got to tell them how to make a ranged weapons check because of a rat.
There's an NPC in our werewolf game called Howling King, and he actually was used in my introductory stuff to try and teach the players how regeneration works. So he's like, "Shift to your Glabro form." They're like, "Are what? Look in your mind's eye." And they're like, "Okay." And none of them had Primal Urge, of course. So one of them botches, and he just starts beating them with a lead pipe. And then one starts going, "Jesus Christ, dude." And they're in Glabro, and he swings the pipe, breaks their leg, and he's like, "Focus on healing." What? Focus on healing! And so it like really like hit them hard with like how savage and like brutal werewolves are. And how like, and he's like, "You can do this for anything but fire, my claws, or silver. Now fucking do it." And they're like, "I'm trying." Hits him in the other leg with the silver pipe. And he's like, "Try harder.
Werewolf harder."
Yeah. That's werewolf for you. Actually, probably one of the funnest things was actually in that Pathfinder game I was talking about. One of the players, she had never really played any tabletop or anything, and she knocked a succubus to perfect 0 hit dice, a summoned succubus to perfect 0 hit dice, which does not unsummon them. You have to knock them below their hit points. She ended up capturing a succubus for the local church.
Fantastic.
Because why not? Just walk in and go up to Father O'Reilly. "Look what I did."
Pretty much. But, like, yeah, no, it was one of those fights where, like...
You guys use any cultural touchstones to, like, try and do shorthand for certain aspects of games?
What do you mean?
Like, you're like, "Hey, it's like blank, like, it looks like," and then you bring up a pop culture reference of some kind, or a book, or something like that.
Sometimes, depending on the situation. Other times, I prefer to stick with I just give like a brief description of the thing. Like in a Pathfinder game, none of them had played Pathfinder, so I had them fighting kobolds, and I just briefly described a kobold without ever using the word kobold.
Okay.
Just until they figured out what it was, and then from that point on, I referred to it as a kobold.
I do something similar in setting, because there's so many settings there.
Yeah.
I think one of the games that was one of the hardest to get somebody into had to be 7th Sea.
Really?
That's a pirate game, right?
It's a pirate game, but the thing that really threw them was the fact that only one of the other players at the table spoke the language they had.
So they couldn't talk to each other. Only two members of the party could communicate with each other at a given time.
But that's one of the things about 7th Sea, is it's very, very... For the time period it's set in, which is the golden age of piracy in a fantasy setting, not everybody could speak all the languages. Like, if you weren't a noble, you probably didn't even know what the guy in the next village was actually speaking, because the dialect shifts.
Right.
Makes sense.
So, yeah.
I did a little like touch for something where there was a halfling like community in one of the kingdoms I ran for a Pathfinder game, and when I was a halfling, I always of that particular nation, they spoke very rapidly, and someone finally went, "Yo, what's up with you speaking like 100 miles an hour?" And the halfling went, "Much like us, all of our words are short. Your words are too long, and so sentences take forever. So we gotta speak really fast."
Good. I like that. I think for me, the touchstones I use, because I am a filmmaker and a scriptwriter, is I try and make it visual through words. I try to use contextual words for, like, when someone's undergoing their first change, since all of us have done werewolf in one form or another. I give them that visceral feeling of how their body would feel as it's shape-shifting, as the frenzy takes hold, and then they black out.
Nice. I like that one. Big one I do as a transition from new players to new players to more experienced players in our game is at the beginning I was very visceral about the Fomori and like every little detail about every Fomori they ever came across. As the game went on, I just described them a little less because they became a little more normal.
Yeah, that's a cool
trick. They became less detailed, or your players just became desensitized to them.
Well, I got less detailed in my descriptions because the characters, after running into so many Fomori, they're not going to focus. What I also do is when I start off is I focus on the human element of the Fomori a lot.
Right,
like the personal suffering, and then they become more and more like enemies as the players feel like they're more and more warriors of Gaia, and they're clearly shutting that aspect out.
They're ignoring the human aspect. These are just things that need to die now.
Yep.
On that note, one of the things I do, especially with new players who happen to play my favorite tribe, the Children of Gaia, is I always try to bring in a little bit of the edge of humanity no matter how often they've run into something. For a second, one time where it was a bunch of new players who had been just going through a bunch of Fomori, and there was a Child of Gaia in the pack. And the Child of Gaia, is about to deliver this death blow to this enemy who had been spewing this acidic vomit on everybody. And he looks into the eyes and can just see the absolute human terror in the eyes.
Yeah, that can be a thing to do especially when you're actively making it a story element that your characters are getting numb to all of this. Is give them that occasional punch in the gut to remind them of what's happening.
Yep. And I do things like that on occasion. I will occasionally sprinkle in humanity again just to give them a jolt and a reminder after they've been so desensitized.
Yeah. Maybe even on that idea, occasionally have your character make a degeneration roll if you're in World of Darkness when they just start casually joking about fighting Fomori. Just suggest that maybe they're starting to lose their way a little bit because they're treating these things that used to be people as nothing more than obstacles to be cleared in the most over-the-top fashion they can think of.
I think it's a good way of doing it. Just you desensitize them and you just bring it back and you give them that kind of tonal whiplash to make them think about how much they've changed throughout a chronicle or a campaign, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. Especially if they don't have an NPC in their backstory that they haven't interacted with in a while, that you can just have them stumble across.
Yeah. Another way to get people used to a setting is I do like a lot of the can shots, because it's here's your character already pre-generated. Here's a set story. Let's go.
That's fair.
It's
with
I kind of like that about the Modiphius Conan game because it's designed to be episodic, so you don't have to have too much of a backstory or anything like that. You're from this area, it's like Egypt, but not, and go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is where you from. Wizard bad, go kill.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Unless you play a wizard and you're just like, oh god, wizardry's so powerful, but if you fail a wizard roll, you get
you get hosed.
It's bad.
It makes Paradox look like a freaking punch, like a punch with a feather pillow.
Because in Conan, it's a roll low system with a die pool, pool that's between usually 2 to 5, and if you got to roll under your skill plus attribute, and if you roll under what's your focus, you get 2 successes on that die. You have a difficulty of how many successes you need. But if you roll a 20, you get a complication. And the thing is that you can succeed a roll and still get a complication. So if you roll like 4 dice, you get 5 successes on hitting your guy, but you still rolled a 20, you might lodge your sword in like their shoulder and you let go, and now your sword's like sticking in them and you're weaponless and you got to grab another one or something like that. But with sorcery, any failed dice or any failed die is a complication. And a 20 is 2 complications.
Literally blow yourself up.
Like wild magic on steroids.
Yep, and complications are not inherently damaging to your person, but they can destroy things like equipment and things like that are relatively transient in Conan.
Right. Enough of an inconvenience to make the wizard thankful for every success.
Yeah, and think before they do anything, because some spells that were ridiculous. Like there's one where if you get 5 successes on your wizard roll, you stop the person's heart, it ignores all armor soak, and you just crush their heart, and you can almost insta-kill something, because it's got something called the Savage moniker on it, which means how Conan works is you have your vigor track and your actual wound track. Once vigor is completely empty, you take a wound. If you take 5 points of vigor damage in a single hit, you take a wound. And if you get a combination of the two, you get 2 wounds. And there's this tag that is, if you cause a wound with this attack, you get an extra one for every wound you cause. So if you do 3 wounds, you have insta-killed that person.
Yeah, I haven't played Conan, but I've looked at the book, and yeah, it looks pretty brutal.
It's very fluid, though, and the nice thing, too, is you can have armor on, and if you don't want a wound penalty, because you roll randomly to see where you hit on someone, so if there's no armor there, then they get hit. So if they're not wearing a helmet, there's no soak there. But if they're wearing full plate and you hit them in the chest, there's plenty of soak. But if that soak is not enough to stop you from getting a wound, what you can do is you take the vigor damage, and then you sacrifice the plate, and you say that the plate has been destroyed in a way that prevented the wound from happening, but that particular body part is no longer armored.
I just thought of an old system that if you can find it, it's probably one of the easiest ones to get people into, and it's actually a Palladium game.
Really?
It's called Toon. You literally create a cartoon. It's called Toon. You literally create a cartoon character.
Oh.
And instead of dying, you get knocked out.
Okay.
So it's literally like playing like a Merry Melodies or a Looney Tunes character.
Pugmire has something like that. They have an extra rule set that's like, some people are not comfortable with dogs dying, so you might just want to run with the they got knocked out trope. Also, this game is kind of meant for children, so...
Toon was designed to be, too. It was supposed to be, like, for the under 16 crowd.
Right.
But it is a more simplified version of the Palladium rule set, and finding systems like that to introduce people is also something that I think is great. Oddly enough, one of the games I think is great for getting people into RPGs is actually a board game.
Really?
Betrayal.
I just immediately thought of Dragon Strike.
No, Betrayal at the House on the Hill.
I have that one.
It is a pseudo RPG game.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because you get a little character disc that has attributes on it, and you can level those up as you explore this house, and you find things out, and there's a story element to it. For each time you play, it's a different story.
Mm-hmm.
That's
how I've gotten a couple of my friends who were big board gamers who'd never played RPGs to play. We played that a couple times.
I got a few people in with Mortals Chronicles for that same reason, because it's just simple, easy pickup to play, and once again, just easy to grok right away.
Yeah. I remember when I was a teenager, it was basically if I was hanging out with my friends for any length of time, it was are you going to bring Dragon Strike with you? And I basically ended up running it like a really simplistic game of D&D. It ended up with one instance where the elf was hiding under a table from a troll and lost his sword because he tried to stab the troll in the neck with it when he wasn't paying attention and got his sword bit in half. he spent the rest of the game with a fire poker as a replacement.
I mean, if it works.
Anytime we played after that, he insisted, "Do I still have the fire poker?" I said, "Yes, you still have the fire poker."
One I found was difficult to get new people into was some of the OSR games, especially Old School Essentials, which I love because it's basically just a retro clone of the old basic D&D set, BX rules, but because there's just so many different kinds of die rolls, I learned real quick that new people, even though it's way more open-ended, so it's a lot easier for people to conceptually get certain things, the die rolls do not support that.
Yeah. I haven't had a chance to try it, but I've been playing with the idea of introducing people who aren't used to Warhammer 40k by playing only War, because then you're just a member of the army, and I just give them a standard generic infantry division to be a part of. They're just Bob, Jim, and John Smith in the infantry experiencing all this for the first time.
That's a good way of doing it.
For me, I think one of the hardest systems has to be Fading Suns.
Which one's Fading Suns?
It's the best way I can describe it. It's kind of a Dune knockoff.
Okay.
Fading Suns takes place far in the future. For some reason, all the stars are going out at the same time, and nobody knows why. One of the theories by the church is God got pissed. But the thing is people can only travel between star systems through these gothic-looking gates. If you try and go outside of a star system, Eldritch horrors eat you. And it has multiple houses. There's like religious prohibitions against cybernetics and psionics. But like one of the houses is really heavy into cybernetics, so they're like, eh. Another house has psionic warriors that like can basically wreck anything. So
it's a case of, oh, you don't like this? Well, how about you come up here and make me stop?
I was gonna say, It sounds like it's a case one Butlerian jihad, please.
Yeah. And the other one the other one for the RPG has to be BattleTech as well. Like the original, I haven't tried the new RPG, but the original BattleTech RPG.
Okay.
Because BattleTech is just so lore heavy, it's so lore dependent.
Yeah. There was one I used. I got a couple people into RPGing with the Star Wars Sagas edition.
Oh, that was good.
I had it so no one played a Jedi, because Jedi are just so, like, they don't feel like Jedi in that edition in my mind, because they are not that strong compared to everyone else. And then I had the revised edition where Jedi were ridiculous, and in that edition it's everyone's a Jedi. Because whoever is not a Jedi is going to feel bad. And that was a good way of getting people into the game, actually. We did a Clone Wars game that ended with Order 66.
Nice. And I think that's the other thing, is finding RPGs that are based in settings that already exist. Like, I've had a lot of, like, the Fate system's kind of wonky to get people into, but I've gotten people into RPGs by running Dresden File games, because Dresden Files, let's go.
Of course, it is always a concern when you're going into something with an established setting, is you're almost guaranteed to have at least one guy who wants to mess with the story.
And I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
Like, you have it, if you're taking the Star Wars example, there's the guy who wants to go dive bomb the Death Star.
Yep. We had one guy who wanted to dive bomb Palpatine, and one player goes, "I'll straight up stop you." And he's like, "Why?" And he goes, "Because I don't know he's a Sith."
Yeah, it makes no sense for us to be doing this.
And that was enough to deter him. Like, the rest of the player base is just like, "We'll stop you."
Yeah.
Makes no goddamn sense. The other one I got people into is I use the Mutants and Masterminds DC Hero Universe RPG.
Oh, that's fun.
And we did a Bat Family episode session. I should say session. We did a Bat Family session where we switched around some of the equipment, and so it was Nightwing as Batman when Batman had disappeared. like Red Hood, Tim Drake Robin, and Batgirl. And it was, of course, a Joker thing, because why wouldn't it be?
Right.
And no, I had one buddy, he was playing Damian Wayne, actually, but we were playing it out, and I got him with a line from a comic that luckily none of them ever read, where the Batman shows up and the Joker goes, "You don't smell like a bat. You smell like a bird." And it was like, fuck.
No, you bringing up the DC thing. Yeah, I almost killed Superman. I was playing. Our characters ended up getting transported into the Injustice universe. My character was the only sorcerer in the group, and I used transmutation to create about a 1-inch thick layer of kryptonite that went out because I critical rolled twice in a row. Back-to-back crits that stretched over 50 miles across the Bonneville Salt Flats.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oops.
I was like, well, our Hulk character sitting there, I used enhancement and I enhanced his strength so he actually had a chance of fighting Superman fist to fist. And then I'm like, I've got this small little chunk of kryptonite. Screw it, let's go. And then Superman falls out of the sky. And I'm like, ooh.
I get solo XP.
I had thought about having them go against Superman Prime. And as ridiculous as all of that is, and not use the game stats, use the actual comic book equivalent where he's the Silver Age Superman, so he just gets the power of context sensitive at times.
Oh god.
And punch reality in the face.
Yeah, he punches reality so Red Hood comes back alive because his death got punched out of reality, but him getting buried in his grave was not. But one of my players was like, we'll just get kryptonite. And then I showed him the comic where Superman fights a doomsday where all of his spikes are kryptonite and he's holding him back on, "I'm going blind. It hurts." And he starts like cracking him and like lifting him into space. "But I will win." And I'm like, please go on with your arrogance.
Do try this. I want to top this scene.
Right? It's just like, man, I can tell your only exposure to Superman was the old Justice League cartoon series, and it shows. Superman suffered some major Worf syndrome in that series.
Was the Warner Brothers one?
Yeah.
I actually really liked that. I think that was my favorite portrayal of Batman, but that's a different topic.
I liked the series. Like, it's still one of my favorites of all time, but Superman does get done dirty in that one because he's Worf. They have to have the big scary guy, and to show how strong the enemy is, they have to hit the big scary guy and knock him down in one punch.
Yeah.
And that Superman got that role in that series. Though it did give us one of the greatest Superman speeches.
The World of Cardboard.
The World of Cardboard. So good. Also the one of where they did the Alan Moore comic where he lives in his perfect world with a son and he gives all of that up to rip the plant off of him.
Mm-hmm.
God.
Yeah. There was that one. To me, it had to be, I'm not sure if it was the original Justice League or if it was the second series, but the Batman and Ace. The moment with Batman and Ace on the swing set.
That was Unlimited, yeah. But you bring up people who grew up with that and you bring them the DC RPG, they will
where
eat
Superman
that
is
shit
basically
up.
You lose.
Yeah. And you go, yeah. Superman has like 10 one true weaknesses, one of them being magic.
Don't roll initiative, roll new characters.
Yeah, exactly. But no, that's a great way, and it's a recommendation I do for a lot of people who want to get their friends into RPGs, is if they have the knowledge to pick up a system like that that's already in an established universe, I highly recommend they do that.
I don't know. One thing I remembered from my own experiences, if you're playing Pathfinder and somebody wants to play a paladin, but they've never played anything like a paladin, make sure they know ahead of time what they're getting into.
Yeah, don't be that dick DM. man. Like,
I didn't realize I thought I'd explained the concept of the Paladin's code of ethics enough. What I got was a suicidal paladin because he was upset that he couldn't keep killing the kobolds when they surrendered. Every fight started with the paladin rushing, like the ranger yelling, "Surrender!" and the paladin punching him in the face, saying, "No, don't surrender!"
Oh, man. Okay. Yeah. I think 5e corrected a little bit of that, thankfully, where you can be a paladin that has a slightly different code of ethics.
Yeah, and Pathfinder has so many paladin archetypes for first edition that, like, you can be a gray paladin. Sure, you lose a bunch of stuff, but you're not bound to the lawful good alignment.
Yeah, I did, for the sake of ease, because none of them had played Pathfinder, and frankly, neither had I at the time. I basically limited them to the basic classes, the basic races, and none of the archetypes, just so we could all get a handle on things.
That's a good call, I think. You definitely don't want analysis by paralysis.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I did that for a lot of new groups too.
But yeah, it made for a funny bit when we realized he was actively trying to kill his character, and we kept saving him. I had to get literal divine intervention involved in order to save him in one instance.
So you nod-wicked it. Got it.
I had the goddess of battle and valor descend from on high while he lay there in a pool of his own blood and say, "It is not yet your time, my child," and hoist his soul back into his body.
Oh, jeez.
Immediately in the next fight, he threw himself in front of the boss to tank the biggest hit he could and keeled over.
Oh, God.
And then they healed him again.
When I was a young, dumb DM who was like, "Yeah, just come on over, we'll play D&D," and we had like a group of 9 people.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Yep. I think everyone can say they have made that mistake once or twice in their DMing careers.
I have not made that mistake.
For me, it wasn't a mistake. It was I had enough people who were just super excited, so I was like, okay, let's do this. I'm gonna go nuts, but let's go.
20 minutes in, what was I thinking?
Right, yeah. Every time. And combat took forever, and you had to have because it was 3.5, like...
Oh, yeah.
And so you had all this happening, and combat took so long that people would just disengage and like have side conversations. And so I aimed a disintegration at the one cleric, and he got taken out and I went, "Greg's dead," and all the side conversations were still going, and someone goes, "I'm sorry, what? Greg's dead." And that's when they all started like going silent, and they're like, "Come again? Greg's dead. Greg," and then they all focused up for the rest of the fight.
That's the DM mic drop moment. It's like, well, what now?
Mm-hmm.
Do I have your attention now?
But no, now I cap out at groups of 6. It's good to be practiced at groups of 6 because when I go to cons and things like that, especially like Gen Con, they want bigger groups like that to play, which I get.
I think the biggest I've ever run was 5 people, and that was a party in Pathfinder who rolled nothing but squishy spellcasters.
For tabletop, I cap at about 6. LARP's a different story.
Yeah, LARP's always a different story.
Yeah, I almost killed that spellcaster group with 4 goblins behind a palisade, and only 2 of the goblins had bows.
Oh.
It was sad. They were dragging the wounded around a corner, throwing what spells they still had at them.
That's awesome, actually.
I ran a 5e group, and there was a hobgoblin there, so the goblins were using tactics where they cracked the door open and they were shooting arrows through it. And one of them got mad and goes, "You can't use tactics against me, Keegan. I'm dumb as hell."
At one point, they set the palisade on fire, and one of the sorcerers yells, "I got it!" and flings himself onto the fire to try and knock over the palisade.
Oh no!
They have to drag him back by his ankles to safety while the one healer tries to patch him up.
Oh no! Man.
He's barely alive, yelling, "We can take him!"
I will say too, 5e is way more spellcaster friendly than Pathfinder was for new players.
Yeah.
Like,
because you can use your cantrips infinitely, and I think every spellcasting class has at least one cantrip that can do damage.
Yeah, there was that, and I think the other one though is that it's instead like even prepared spellcasters like the wizard and things like that is you choose intelligence +1, I think, or intelligence mod plus level or something like that spells. And
you get more spells a day than the Pathfinder counterpart would.
Yeah, well, in Pathfinder, technically rules is written is you have to plan out every spell slot as a wizard. Yep. And that is not the case in 5e. 5e, it is you get this select amount of spells that you chose for the day, and then you can dispense them in spell slots at your leisure, which I think was a real good move for new players.
Yeah, in Pathfinder, every day anytime the DM declares it's a new day, the wizard has to crap, and sit there with his spell book in silence for 20 minutes while he thinks of what he's going to need that day.
Yeah, exactly.
That's generally when I sit down before I build a spellcaster and ask the DM what sort of ecology we're going to be in for spellcasting. That makes it easier. And that's the other thing about getting people into settings and systems is, as the storyteller, unless you're completely brand new with everybody else, you should make sure that the new players are given context beforehand, making sure that they understand what the heck they're getting into.
Oh, sure. And I agree with that. I think players trying to prepare a spell for every spell slot is either going to be tedious or they're going to forget at some point. And then and then eventually you either have to be the dick and enforce it because it's happened too many times, or you lax up on it and the spellcaster's a little more flexible, which, however you need to do it for your group and what works best for your group. But it's just something I've noticed, and it's something that has been less than newbie friendly in the past. And so I like how a lot of games are becoming more newbie friendly. I think a lot of people got mad at V5 for being a bit more newbie friendly in terms of bare bones setting, along with other things. Some in my mind justified, some absolutely not. What do you mean the Sabbat can't overthrow the global government? Well, because that goes against the theme of the fucking game.
Yeah. Balance, that's why.
Because the other supernatural forces out there will come and eat your face.
It's not even that. A big theme of Vampire is we have to remain secret or humanity outnumbers us.
That's the entire shtick for all the old World of Darkness games is, on pound for pound we're tougher than a human, but there's a lot of humans nowadays.
There's like 3 billion humans on the planet. We're a small minority.
Yeah, exactly. And so I see people mad about the Sabbat getting destroyed by the Second Inquisition is impossible. I'm like, I disagree. But
I agree as well, because the Sabbat have been dumb butts for years.
Yeah,
the Sabbat are kind of cackling, mustache-twirling idiots. That's their thing.
They tried to give them some nuance in Revised Edition, which I appreciated. And there's some themes there that I'll heavily revise if I run a Sabbat game. Mm-hmm. But this is the uncomfortable truth is I'm real careful about who I invite to play in my World of Darkness games. To some degree, I have made contests on this site to get people into my games, and I haven't been burned yet, but I am playing with fire because there are so many edgelords in the World of Darkness fandom that it's man.
Oh yeah, I know. Tell me about it.
Definitely.
Been part of both the Mind's Eye Society and One World by Night for a couple of decades now.
When you have darkness in the title of the setting, you're going to invite a lot of those people.
Yeah.
I think one of the other things that has to be taken into consideration when trying to get new people in is their comfort level with the subject matter. World of Darkness can get dark.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, obviously.
In the Werewolf LARP I'm in a part of here in Minneapolis, my character is basically a child of Gaia, hardcore child of Gaia. I get told I am the Gaiaest Gaian child of Gaia that has ever Gaia'd, basically.
Yeah.
But
you are basically the character description given in the rulebook.
Pretty much, yes. Jordan is that way, yes. And my character runs an actual women's abuse shelter in-game and other things. So, like, the storylines I bring players into with Jordan, I have to make sure they're okay with the ideas of these very horrible subject matters as a player when I'm bringing them along on these story arcs that are Jordan-centric.
Right.
Yeah.
And to an extent, some of that is is covered by the when you all get together for the first time to actually agree to play the game. It's setting down the ground rules. Like,
yep.
This is something we don't talk about.
Yep. We started our game, I think, I want to say a year before Consent in Gaming came out. And I used a lot of those practices for this game going into it, because I sat down and I was like, before we make characters, we got to talk about what you do not want to see in this game, because I can and I do go very, very dark with it at times. I can go very dark with it. I have done sessions that involved such things as human trafficking. There is a side episode of the podcast right now that deals with that. And so I'm like, I need to know what cannot happen on screen, what cannot be implied, what has to be ignored, like, because we can get real dark. And I wrote that all down in a document, and if I ever onboard new players before they make characters,
they get the document.
I bring up the document. I go, these can't be discussed. What do you want to add to it?
Yeah, because 2 words for you: Zamishi house.
Mm-hmm.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Shimize are basically, oh crap.
Yeah. Or, if really a Fianna and their Metis child. How Fianna do you want them to be around that Metis child? Because you're going to be start playing with some real bad themes of like child abuse and things like that potentially. And like you as a storyteller can even go, I'm not cool with these themes.
Yeah.
And I think to be honest, to me, like, the system doesn't matter so much as it does people's willingness to engage in the story, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I can agree with that to a point. There are some systems where I've taken the setting and removed it from the system because the system is just so bad or just not in my wheelhouse.
In my experience, as long as the system is functional and isn't mind-bogglingly, like you don't need a spreadsheet in order to keep track of what all rolls you can make, then it's the only challenge that comes from bringing in a new player is getting them into the story and the setting.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, I've run teenagers whose only experience with RPGs really was Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition through a brief game of Vampire the Masquerade V20, and they were fairly close to the rules. Like I definitely didn't get the frenzy rules down properly, but that was my fault.
Yeah, I've gone through books before, and there's been times when I've gone back to my werewolf books and gone, oh, holy shit, I've been house ruling that for like a decade.
Yep.
Yep. Whoops. Whoops. As long as you're consistent,
what do you mean that's not how that's supposed to work?
Yeah, exactly.
As long as you're consistent, that's all that matters.
Yep. But no, I think that's true, and that's why I do like a lot of closer to the real world settings for people who are brand new. Like I said, with your Call of Cthulhu's or your Delta Greens or your Chronicles of Darkness Mortals, or starting them off as just a week after their first change, werewolves, things like that, because then the processing of the information and the story feels more organic, and you don't even have to start with a one-page piece of homework. It's right there in the game, right?
You literally know nothing. You're in character. You literally know just as much as you know out of character.
Yes.
Nothing.
Exactly.
It's like Werewolf the Apocalypse. What do you know? I'm Warwilf. Good.
Mm-hmm.
That's all you know in character, too.
It's one of the things like I love about the LARP when we actually get people who are brand new, because we have den parents. We actually will run them as cubs.
Yeah.
And to me, that's fun. That's neat watching them come into the game and learning as they go.
No, I agree. And with us, too, we did that. And I actually let them, with that system I was talking about earlier, spending background points, I said, you guys can spend background points into Purebreed. Based on what you've said about your character, I will pick what your Purebreed tribe is. If you choose a different tribe, those Purebreed dots will be refunded instantly after you choose the tribe, and you will be able to spend them elsewhere.
I've always run it where if you get adopted into another tribe, you just basically, you have Purebreed and it's of that tribe, because there is that caveat about the Children of Gaia adopting everybody.
That's true. What I do it as, though, is I run it as Purebreed is how many times your ancestors chose to be in that tribe. So how many times did they choose to be this, choose to be that? And with the Silver Fangs, it gets muddied because of you always have to choose the Silver Fangs, obviously.
You don't get an option.
Mm-hmm. But, yeah, I play with it that way. And I like mixing up things like that.
With Purebreed, I'd probably take the route of they can put it in at character creation, but as the storyteller, I determine what tribe they are.
Mm-hmm.
And if they end up choosing to join a tribe other than the one that they're descended from, then that comes up. Like, if you're a purebreed Fianna and you join, say, the Get of Fenris, you're probably going to have people making fun of you. Not necessarily bullying you, but you're going to have a lot of Irish jokes at your expense.
I guess that. I don't want to punish them for choices they made, especially coming into it. So, like, I might run that with more people who've done it before, and we do this method again. But I like the idea of, they have the purebreed, it's in the past sort of thing, but they don't necessarily know. It's actually why we have Cora, because on one side of her kinfolk family is Get of Fenris, and on the other side is Children of Gaia, and she was actually pretty torn on choosing, which is why when she went to the Sept Elder for her Garu name, he chose Two Hearts for her, because though she was a Get of Fenris, she would always belong to the Children of Gaia because he always saw her compassion, and she always defaulted to him, the Child of Gaia, as kind of a mentorish figure.
That's sweet.
Right? A little background for anyone who also listens to the werewolf game here. My players don't listen to this, so I can spoil shit 10 episodes from now.
You say that, and then one of them is going to happen to listen to this specific podcast.
Yeah. Right? I've talked about the themes of colonialization in our werewolf game, and how I'm I keep hitting them over the head with it, but they never seem to get it. Now they're starting to figure it out, and I think they figured it out on their own, but they might have listened to that episode where I was like, come on!
Do you need me to draw you a map?
The other thing about bringing new players in is finding the hook that interests them.
Right.
Oh yeah. And I think that's before character creation.
Oh yeah.
If nothing else, that's probably one of the most important aspects of the character creation, especially for a new character. Even if you don't really have a backstory, just where did you come from and why are you adventuring are the two questions I'd ask.
I think it even goes to more basic than that, and I ask the very simple question: what type of story do you want to tell?
That's a good call. I like that.
That is first question I ask before we even get into character creation and building. We're running this in a high fantasy setting. I'm using Pathfinder. We're running this as a high fantasy game. What sort of story do you want to tell? And I had one group of new players say they wanted something on an epic scale of the Lord of the Rings. Hey, let's go. You want this? Cool. There's going to be, and they ended up getting into these massive war and this massive fight, and by the end of it only lasted about 6 months. By end of it, like one of the characters died, like everybody at the table, including me, just started crying.
Nice. We had something where this was actually my very first werewolf game I ever ran from end to end. And it was close to the apocalypse. And they had a member of older brother as kind of a mentor to the whole pack. And he was the master of right and all that. And I've house ruled it differently for all future games because I think it's more dramatic. But in this one, it's if you lose Gnosis, you're just disconnected from the spirit world. And he had to do, on the eve of the apocalypse, a rite that just destroyed all of his Gnosis. And we were at a friend's house and we had a fire pit. So we sat outside for the pure role-playing because there was going to be no die rolls. And we were talking around the fire pit. And his name was Voice of 1,000 Spirits. And he was talking about it and how he felt disconnected from everything. And it all got quiet. And I went, I don't have a voice anymore. And I just heard all of them go, ah.
I think that's what will get people, like, once you get them into a setting, if you can get those moments that just kind of grab them by the heart. Like, I think for me, when I first started playing World of Darkness, it was actually in the LARP, and I was playing a Gangrel in a Camarillo city in San Francisco. I was like maybe 4 months out of boot camp from the Coast Guard. And I came from the East Coast to the West Coast, so yeah. And I walked up to the Prince of the City and handed him 3 bumper stickers. Absolutely batshit nuts Toreador, who I found out later had like 7 derangements. And I handed him 3 bumper stickers. I like shiny objects. And the other one was, I leave bite marks, and the third one was, I have the power to destroy you. And my character got his acknowledgement in the city just for doing that.
Nice.
Because the Toreador assumed it was a threat.
No, because the prince thought it was hilarious.
Oh, okay.
I also have taught my players a basic thing called the Bilbo Baggins effect, or the Bilbo Baggins choice, which is if the majority of the group wants to do one thing and you think your character wouldn't want to do that, just think of a way why they could, like invent a reason so that the story goes on, because it's no fun to be just separate from the group. And it's been a good way of describing that, because it's like, well, technically, if Bilbo followed his character that was established in the first 2 chapters, he would have stayed the fuck home.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, it gets into the Campbell's hero's journey thing, you know, call to adventure and all that.
Yeah, and there's some to that. I like other things, but yeah, I've taught them that. They're like, hey, I don't want, and we negotiate behind the scenes, even for the podcast, where it's just like, hey, I'm not feeling this, but I really want to do this. I'm like, why don't we do this for a session or 2 from now, and then get what you want.
Yeah, no, that's how a lot of things should be. It should be communication in and out of the game about where you want the direction to go. Because, like, one of the Pathfinder games I had started off as a traditional high adventure game, and then somehow or another, like, through the players talking with me because they, you know, because the Underworld movies had come out, and they didn't want to play World of Darkness, but they wanted to deal with vampire stuff, it ended up becoming like this Hellsing Buffy the Vampire cross adventure where they went to one of the nations that's just the nation that's all undead, and they start rampaging through until they run into the Banshee Queen.
Okay. That's pretty cool. And I had one thing I learned, because I've played with more experienced people before, and this is kind of a lesson learned for me a while ago, is we were doing a game, and the characters were a bit combative here and there, but what ended up happening was actually in a tabletop a lot of character bleed. And so that player left because they realized that the bleed had happened and they didn't think they could get out of it. And I picked up on it too late because I was asking how we can change the game to make them feel better, things like that. And they mentioned the character that they were butting heads with's name, and said they were trying to stop me. And I was like, time out, what happened? And so now I've implemented like a debrief every session going, did you feel like someone undercut you? Someone did this in character that you took personally, so on and so forth?
Yeah, it's a good thing to do, because that first game with the suicidal paladin, the party consisted of a magus, a paladin, and a ranger. And that brief attempt ended with the magus convincing the paladin to help him bushwhack the ranger because of some stupid decisions.
Okay.
And I basically had to come down as the fist of God and say, yeah, no, this ain't happening.
Yeah.
Because it was basically the ranger had found a bunch of money, because I was using a pre-made module. The ranger found a bunch of money and kept it a secret. Mm-hmm. And he made a bad decision that resulted in an NPC they were trying to save dying. Mm-hmm. And so the magus decided, yeah, no, this guy's got to go. And convinced the paladin through private messaging to help him.
Ow.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I do the same thing with a debrief, like at the end of the werewolf tabletop game I'm running now, which has mostly new players. I always do, like, the last 15 minutes of game, as always, we talk about, like, what you guys like, what you guys think it needs to be worked on,
That's actually exactly what I do.
Yeah.
Favorite moments of the night. And I think that's something that, every game master should do. You should do a decompression. Like, it's one of the things that, since we've changed the LARP because of the pandemic onto an online setting only through Discord, I miss going to afters. I miss going to, a mom and pop restaurant after game, one of the little 24-hour diners that's open, going there after game and just having some food and just laughing my butt off for about an hour and a half with my friends.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, I hear you. That's
honestly one of the most fun parts of the game, is just talking and making and laughing about all the weird stuff you did in the middle of the session.
Yep. I cleaned that up from our recordings, because it does happen a lot. Like, we actually play like 3-hour sessions, but I cut out all the questions, some of the die roll sounds, or people like doing math in their head, so it's a little more dramatic. Yeah. Like, not so much in the earlier. Yeah, you're on the early episodes still, Chris. So you're still in my garbage phase.
I would say it's garbage. I would say that is you guys learning how to do production. Like, come on, you've heard my podcast, and I'm not an audio guy.
I know. I went back and re-listened to my first episode. I'm like, we will never return here.
I guarantee it is not bad. It is not as bad as our first attempt at recording Pathfinder in the group that no longer meets. We made a mistake with the audio that we didn't realize until it had been edited. But everyone except the guy recording had their audio playing double because someone had an echo.
Oh,
so
man.
for like 2 hours worth of footage.
Yeah, we had one Blue Yeti mic around a table because I didn't have the audio experience to set up multiple things, and because of how it's set up, I'll probably keep running games through Discord even after COVID's done and I'm all vaccinated.
Yay, vaccine!
Yeah, if you're listening to this and you're not getting a vaccine, I am in fact judging you.
I go and get my second dose on a week from tomorrow, actually.
Nice. It just opened up for me, so.
I'm a vet, so the VA kind of changed their eligibility.
Oh, got it.
I was in the Coast Guard for about 5 years, back in 2000.
Gotcha.
I had to take a bit of break from listening to the Werewolf podcast just because, holy crap, it's a slog at times.
I understand.
No, it's good. It's just like, as a werewolf player, I'm like, oh god, guys, no, not the dome.
There were some good ones. There's some really good bad decisions that drove the story forward.
The oil platform.
Fuck. That set up one of my favorite. Oh, okay.
I haven't listened to the podcast, so I have no context.
Yeah, I turned a werewolf into a survival horror RPG when a rank 5 balefire shark jumped at them on an oil platform.
It became the Deep Blue Sea all over again.
Yeah.
Now Samuel L. Jackson to make it cool.
There was also a Yeren, who is now our longest reoccurring villain. He's still around. Nice. And he's still very mad at them.
Mockery breeds?
Yep. He's mad at them for killing his friends.
Aw, poor Pentek minion.
Right.
It'd actually be really funny to have them fighting some legitimately evil antagonist, only for turn out the reason he's against them isn't because of a difference in ideology. No, you killed my friends. I loved those people.
Like, they have a difference in... Yeah, they have a difference in ideology, but that is the main reason he is hyper-focused on them. You killed my friends.
I couldn't care less about what Pentex wants or what the worm wants. You killed my fish friend.
Yep. That's what it is. And so he shot a bazooka at them via helicopter.
Always fun when you bring in the high explosives.
Right? And you're missing some good dialogue from Kyle Guardslow, because in the latest one, after they fought a bunch of spirals, and one of them used Burrow, and they had the Totem of Green Dragon, his head popped out of the ground, and he vomited balefire up his body, which caused a scar. Ooh. And he's just like, God, I've got to be one of the ugliest fucking Garu in the world. I have so many fucking scars.
Yeah. Good times. Yeah, no, I'm going to try and get caught up over the next couple of, probably next month or so.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. I mean, there's well over, 80 hours now, easily.
Jeez.
We're at episode 66 as of the time of this recording, with several points.
Let me check my Audible app real quick, and yes, I am actually reasonably certain that your podcast is now longer than the Bible.
Yes.
So I will.
It's in here somewhere.
Eventually, Egan. I will eventually.
I understand. It's long, and I honestly don't find myself being happy with the audio quality until after they're in the secret underground base under DIA Airport.
That's fair. I will say, I do enjoy your podcast. I find it fun and good time, man.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I changed some setting things around, the Garu are a little more cohesive in America, just because the storm meter happened and that was their oh shit light bulb moment.
No, that's fair.
There's little changes here and there that I'm sure you've picked up on, where it's that's not the default setting, and it's I know.
But your world. I don't critique what you're doing in your world, because you are running a world that's tailored to how you think the world of darkness should be. I'm a big fan of running raw in most settings starting out. When you've got a bunch of new people who are learning it, you should run it as close to raw as possible so that they understand the mechanics and society and all that. The tabletop game I'm running, they actually rescued enough of the Croatan to reestablish the tribe in modern day.
Nice.
Because they're stuck in an abscess created by a chunk of the Eater of Souls.
I found a few years ago, I found an online play-by-text group. I didn't join, I just found it at some point, and they actively did not use Pentex because they felt Pentex was just too stupid and cartoony.
Okay. I disagree with that premise, but to each their own.
I mean, I can understand where they're coming from. I'd still use Pentex, but...
Mm-hmm.
I mean, but it's nice having the villains, when they realize that the global evil villains are... not a cohesive whole, and they are kind of cartoony buffoons who are just scary because they have a metric butt ton of power.
the way I describe Pentex is it's basically if you took a Captain Planet villain and put him in an R-rated series, but did not upgrade his mentality to match the new rating, only his methods.
Look, man, I'll agree with you on that, but given how much news I've watched, I'm not so convinced that Captain Planet villains aren't realistic anymore.
That's fair.
like they're so Captain Planet. Fucking and.
I mean, that's the thing is making sure you have that level of humanity in the system in the games. Like,
yeah,
like sure, I had one game I was running for a bunch of new players years ago in 3.5 where they got hired by this noble to wreck this other noble's house. Like, his house in the noble sense. Like, wreck their reputation, destroy their trade caravans and all this other stuff. And, you know, and yeah, sure, the other house was lawful evil, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Because it makes you, you know, you're still going to follow the laws of the kingdom, you're just going to find every loophole possible. So they thought they were being like these great big heroes until they get arrested by the king's men because the guy who hired them while he was, you know, neutral good, he was doing all this crap because of a slight at a banquet 5 years prior.
He wasn't doing it because these are terrible people. He was doing it because this guy because this guy wore the same shoes he did.
No. It was even worse than that. It's because the one family of lawful evil people had taken his favorite manservant from him, offered him better pay.
That's fantastic.
And that's the whole reason for the campaign.
I ran a Primeval World of Thule game a couple years ago, and it's easily one of my favorite D&D settings. It's also for Pathfinder, and it's basically in ancient Greenland that's covered in jungles. Atlantis sank 100 years ago. In a few other 100 years, we're going to see the rise of the Hyborian kingdoms and Conan. The Melibonians from Elric just phase shifted into this world, beat up a bunch of demons to establish a city as well. And there's a sentient glacier moving in. Like, it's your bog standard, like, kitchen sink, sword and sorcery fantasy game with bonus rules on giving experience based on treasure so that it incentivizes players to hoard and spend treasure.
Mm-hmm.
And I had this sorceress that they went up against, and as the game progressed, she became more and more Lovecraftian because I did her as an old god sorcerer bloodline until she became a star spawn of Cthulhu at the end of the campaign. And they'd been tracking her throughout the game, and they needed her location, so they went to an ancient temple with a sleeping lich, revived the lich, got the information, set him loose into the world so that they could finally get their vengeance on the sorcerer. And then I hear one of my players in the background going, Hans, are we the baddies? Are we the baddies, Hans?
The Pathfinder party, who were composed of mercenaries, their first day in town, technically their second, they enslaved some random gang member who had been a part of the gang. Their first job was to break up.
Uh-huh.
I say they enslaved him. They went to the bar on their first day, the Smiling Unicorn, and the Cavalier, who is a perpetual alcoholic, stands up and yells, "All right, which one of you punks is a member of this gang?" And I had not expected this, so I just have a random guy as a member of the gang stand up. I am. Challenge you to a drinking contest. Loser leaves town. He wins the contest, and they drag him. The Cavalier wins, and as they're trying to intimidate information out of this random gang member, they drag him into the back room of the bar to torture him. They waterboard him with the booze, which melted through the floor. They crack him in the groin with a bar stool, and they're still not getting anything out of him because he doesn't know anything, because I just invented him 5 minutes ago.
No, Jesus.
Eventually, he gets away. They bust up the gang's hideout, and they find out that one of the guys they didn't kill, but just left unconscious in the bathroom, was this guy. They're like, Steve, great to see you, buddy. Here's a mop. You work for us now. And they basically used him as their personal assistant.
Wow.
All right.
And they're like, no, this is going to be great. We're going to teach Steve how to fight. We're going to send him back to base to get trained, and he's going to be a member of... It's going to be great. I'm like...
Fantastic.
You told him he couldn't go home anymore. He lives in the barracks with you guys.
We're going to call it here. I was going to call this new character creation and maybe not ramblings, but that turned out to be wishful thinking. So welcome to our next...
And war stories.
Yeah. So thank you to everyone who listened. We'll catch you in the next time I decide to do one of these. Until then, I'm Keegan. You can find us on Facebook, YouTube, Podbean, but you will never find me on Twitter. I find it a cesspool. Bye.